Good evening. Good evening and welcome. I'm Stan Dale, Acting Director of the Banta Center for Business, Ethics, and Society. Our event today is part of the Banta Center Speaker Series, and this evening we are fortunate to have Mr. Michael D. Montoya. Mr. Montoya is Vice President and Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer for Southern California Edison, SCE, and its parent company, Edison International. Mr. Montoya earned his JD from the University of California, Hastings College of Law, and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Cal Poly Pomona. He joined the SCE Law Department in 1992 as a staff attorney. He is responsible for ethics education and awareness of the helpline and internal investigations. He is also responsible for overseeing 6 separate compliance programs, including records management, energy regulation, and privacy. Previously, Mr. Montoya was Assistant General Counsel for SCE, responsible for legal matters in the areas of energy regulation, labor employment, power procurement, and resource policy and planning. Before his appointment to Assistant General Counsel, Mr. Montoya served for 9 years as manager of the Customer and Tariff section and later the Resource Policy and Planning section of the Law Department. There he was responsible for overseeing legal matters involving long-term procurement plan, the California Renewable Portfolio Standard, the distributed generation rulemaking, and energy efficiency programs. Prior to joining SCE, Mr. Montoya practiced with the Los Angeles law firm of Kane, Ballmer, and Berkman, where he gained extensive experience in the areas of municipal law and redevelopment law. He also practiced with the Los Angeles law firm of Knapp, Peterson, and Clark. Mr. Montoya now serves as a trustee for the Mexican American Bar Foundation. And that about does it for now, and I think we're probably out of time. No. And speaking of time, we will have a brief period for questions and answers following Mr. Montoya's remarks. So at this time, please join me in welcoming Mr. Michael Montoya.
Okay, I'm going to try to go Michaelist. Will that work? Okay, good. That way, hopefully we can have a conversation. That's my goal. It's always my goal when I speak to groups that some way, somehow, you participants walk away with something. So I don't set a high bar. So walk away with something tonight that I'm happy I've done my job. So I don't know if I'm out of video shot. It's going to drive Stan crazy, but it makes it easy. So this past Friday night, my daughter and I went out to the ArcLight in Hollywood to go see a movie. I was fortunate that my daughter actually wanted to spend the evening with me. She had nothing better to do. So we went out to the ArcLight and we saw the movie Eye in the Sky. Has anybody seen the movie Eye in the Sky? Wow, good. I think it'll make its way out to Redlands. So the movie Eye in the Sky, if you read anything, if you Google it after this talk, you'll see that when they talk about the movie, they talk about it raising some really tricky ethical and moral issues. And it's about drone strikes in the military. It's a fascinating movie. I encourage you to see it. I really enjoyed it. But when you see the movie, you'll notice that the director goes to great lengths, and I know this because the director spoke after the showing, so I got the benefit of hearing his comments. But he goes to great lengths to introduce you to all of the players. And so you get to understand the people involved. I don't want to spoil the movie for you, but you had the military brass, you have the politicians, you have the drone operators, the military. And it's important, that was important, because as you will hear, we talk about ethics and compliance. We're talking about the people. The decisions that are made, whether it's the military, whether it's a place like Southern California Edison, whether it's a place like Redlands, the decisions that are made are always made by people. And so it's critically important that you understand how people operate to understand ethics and compliance. And that's really going to be a theme of the talk today. So since we're talking about people, let me finish the introduction and just introduce myself to you a little more, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions just to get a feel for who's in the room. So again, at the end of the night, we'll be friends, one way or the other. So a little about me. So as Stan was saying, I'm the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer at Edison International. Our biggest subsidiary is Southern California Edison Company. How many Edison customers do we have? I know that's when they said Edison, you didn't get a big applause or anything like that. So we need to do a better job. But, so I've been with the company for about 23 years now. Most of that has been as a member of the law department. I'm an attorney by training. And it was only 2 years ago that I was asked whether I had an interest in becoming the Ethics and Compliance Officer. And you know, I knew about compliance, and I thought, and I've been doing the law thing for a number of years, and I thought, you know, this sounds interesting. It's about time in my career to try something different, and I'm a big believer that change is a healthy and good thing. So for those of you, for the students in the audience, keep that in mind. Change is a good thing. It's a healthy thing in a career. It keeps things interesting, so don't be afraid of change. It'll serve you well. So I took on this role, and I quickly learned that, as I mentioned before, it's about the people. The legal training was good, but if I had it over to do again, and I could go back and take classes, I would take classes in behavioral science. And the reason I would take classes in behavioral science would be because it's about the people. So let me just give you Edison at a glance. And I want you to focus on the full-time employees, 13,600 employees. And so from an ethics and compliance standpoint, that's 13,600 people that could screw up. And really, I mean that in a very, in a good way. It's really 13,600 people where you have to try to pull the right lever, create a structure so that ultimately those 13,600 employees do the right thing. And that's really the goal of a strong compliance program. So, we're talking about the people. Here we have some infamous characters. I'm sure you all recognize some of them, right? Let's kind of go through the list there. We got Bernie Madoff in the top left corner. We all know Bernie's story in terms of a Ponzi scheme, ruined the lives of thousands of people, really, when you think about it. Martha Stewart, you know, the queen of television, ran a very successful company, got caught up in an insider trading scandal. Jimmy Swaggart, you know, again, our religious figures aren't exempt. You know, that's really important. Nobody is exempt. Keep going. Nobody is exempt from screwing up. And he, you know, for those of you who remember Jimmy, he got caught up in a sex and prostitute scandal. Mary Barra from GM, is, you know, starting from left to right, the GM ignition device scandal. Martin Winterkorn, so he's a new one, right, from VW. You're all familiar with the VW emission scandal? Great. We're still learning a lot from that. I'll talk about that a little later. It's still very hot in the news. We've got Barry Bonds. We have Pete Rose on the left. Maria Sharapova, she's brand new in terms of the scandal. Took something by the name of meladonium, I think is something like that. Something we've never heard of, and now have learned that it's a heart medication of some sort. It has some performance-enhancing attributes to it. And then we got Seth Blatter from FIFA. My gosh, all you have to do is Google FIFA and scandal, and you'll get just scores and scores of information that you can study. But I want to talk, we got Lance Armstrong. Lance is, and I use Lance a lot when I talk to employees, because it's a great story. You know, because you have the 7 times Tour de France winner, and all of us, I think, were alive at the time when Lance was at the top of the mountain. I mean, Lance, you know, in prior presentations before it all broke, you know, the story unraveled, he would have been held up as one of the greatest athletes of all time. And with the cancer story, it made his story even more compelling. Just amazing. And you know, fortunately, he went from the top of the mountain down to the depths of the ocean. And then there's this guy in the middle. Does anybody recognize the guy in the middle towards the bottom of the screen? A young man, kind of innocent, goofy looking, I mean, cast aspersions, but does anybody recognize who that is? Okay, his name is Jason Millard. My guess is none of you have ever heard of Jason Millard. Well, in 2014, Jason was playing a golf tournament in Tennessee. It was a regional qualifier for the U.S. Open. And Jason was a struggling journeyman golfer. He'd actually almost lost his qualifying card the year before. And Jason, lo and behold, shoots back-to-back 68s and qualifies for the U.S. Open. My God, this is the greatest moment in Jason's life. Journeyman golfer who gets to compete in the U.S. Open. So Jason packs up his bags with his caddy. They're on the road headed towards North Carolina, Pinehurst #2 for all you golfers. And Jason pulls the car over. He takes out his cell phone and he calls the USGA. And he tells the person on the other side of the phone what happened. What happened was, on the 18th hole, in the second round, Jason hit his ball into the bunker. And he got ready to play, and he addressed the ball, and he thinks, and this is what he reported, he thinks he might have touched the sand. And for those of you golfers out there, if you touch the sand when you're in the sand trick with your club, at any time, it's a 2-stroke penalty. So Jason, there was no film, there was no videotape. Jason's playing partner, who he asked, didn't see anything. So it was really Jason's recollection and belief that he might have touched the sand. And so he reported this to the USGA. He was disqualified for signing an incorrect scorecard. And the result is Jason never got to play in the US Open. And what makes the story even more amazing is that if there's anybody who could justify kind of looking the other way and not reporting on himself, it would be Jason. Because the year prior, he'd lost his father to leukemia, and he had the task of taking care of his mother, who since an early age had been stricken by multiple sclerosis. So if there's anyone that needed a break, it was this guy. Yet this young man decided to report himself, and probably, most likely, and I hope it's not the case, most likely, will never get the chance again to play in the U.S. Open. Amazing, amazing story. And it got me thinking, when I started to think about what is it about these other folks, and then in terms of their areas, you've got baseball, you've got cycling, you've got big business. But what is it? Is it just Jason? Is he just better than the rest of them? So is he the one saying among all these sinners? Or is it something bigger than that? And it started me thinking about golf. And for those of you that, how many golfers do we have in the audience? Okay. Are you any good, Stan?
No.
So golf is unique among sports. It's really the oddest thing. Golf self-polices itself. So players from an early age learn that the culture is to report yourself in situations like this. Whether you touch the sand, whether you touch the ball while addressing the ball, all those things which could lead to a penalty. You're expected to report on yourself. And if you Google golf and self-reporting or anything like that, you will find story after story after story, going back, way back to Bobby Jones, back in 1925, who reported, again, that he had, like Jason, reported that he had touched his ball when addressing it and had to take a 1-stroke penalty and lost it in the 1925 U.S. Open. There's something about golf, and it just highlighted for me that culture can make a huge, huge difference. And we're all sinners, we're all saints, but the culture can really make a difference in how it drives us. And really, this is ethics and compliance in a nutshell. I mean, you're seeing it right here with these individuals in their particular sport or line of business. And if you look at these individual stories, you'll see different reasons why somebody might have done the wrong thing, made the wrong choice. Or like Jason made the right choice. And so in ethics and compliance, what we try to do is we try to nudge people one direction. We're direction of doing the right thing when there's so many other pressures who want to move employees, students, administrators, whoever it might be, in the other direction. So what you see before you is the 7 elements of an effective ethics and compliance program under the federal sentencing guidelines. Anybody familiar with the federal sentencing guidelines? All right, that's great. Well, it's essentially the 10 commandments, here are the 7 commandments of ethics and compliance. It's the foundation for every single ethics and compliance program. And where it emanated from the Federal Sentencing Commission, who was looking to put together those elements the federal government would look at in determining criminal culpability and assessing penalties in the face of some type of corporate violation. So when a corporation breaks the law, this is what the federal government will look like and the courts will consider in deciding whether you should get compliance credit, compliance program credit for your program. And so at Edison and in any institution, we'll use this as essentially the guideline to build our program. I should mention, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them. I don't, as you probably noticed, I don't have prepared remarks, so you won't be interrupting a speech or anything like that, so we can have a conversation. So feel free to ask questions. So, is there a difference between ethics and compliance? The answer is yes. And it's really a very basic answer when you see it up there. So, ethics, compliance is really following the rules, following the laws, and ethics is, even in the absence of a specific law, doing the right thing. So that's the basic difference between ethics and compliance. And when I think about it, and how I divide my task, a big part of it is on compliance, but probably a larger part of it is really focused on the ethics side. Because as I said, going back to the golf example, the Jason Millard story, you really want to start from the foundation standpoint of building a strong culture. Because it's really going to save you. So this is the framework that I use in terms of building an strong ethics program. And the first element, starting from the left, we'll go left to right, is clear expectations. And in the context of clear expectations, or in that category, we're talking about the rules, the policies, the code of conduct. We have a really nice employee code of conduct at Edison that we put together about a year ago. We're very proud of it, but it starts with rules. And what you find is that rules have a role to play in any compliance and ethics program. And it's not only giving clear expectations for employees, but even psychologically, behaviorally, rules make a difference. And let me give you an example. There was a study that was done involving students at university, and they were asked to take a math test of some sort, and they could self-score the test. And there was an incentive for getting the most right answers. And so for half the group, they just took the test and self-corrected, and the researchers were looking at the amount of cheating. So half the group, they took the test and they reported their scores. The other half of the group, they asked the students to sign a commitment statement that they would follow the school's code of conduct. And what they found was the group that signed the commitment statement to follow the code of conduct cheated significantly less than the other group. Now the strange thing here was there actually wasn't even a code of conduct. The school did not have a code of conduct. It was simply the belief that there was one and the commitment to follow it made a difference in the amount of cheating. And there's also some studies that have been done, and you'll hear about this if you kind of Google this information, that actually the act of signing can make a difference in the amount of wrongdoing. And I was listening to the radio the other day. Do any of you listen to NPR? Okay, any of you familiar with Shankar Vedantam's Hidden Brains segments? Fascinating. They're on the internet, and I highly recommend them because it talks about social science and behavioral science a lot. And there was a piece that was done on e-signatures. And what they were looking into is what they were testing is whether or not there's a difference in terms of wrongdoing in groups that utilize e-signatures versus the old-fashioned kind of signed into document. And they found that there is a difference. Statistically, there is a difference. That use of e-signatures allowed for kind of more cheating, more violations than when somebody physically signs a document. So again, kind of interesting the way our brains work and what tools institutions use to kind of nudge you in the right direction.
Question.
Sure.
What was the series called?
I think it's called the Hidden Brain, Shamkar Vedanta, NPR. Go to NPR's website and type in Hidden Brain, and you'll get all of his programs. I think there are some podcasts. Thank you. I'm getting there. So the other area that falls into the category of clear expectation goes beyond the rules. We talked about culture, but norms also set the rules in an organization. And in fact, there's a lot of studies that show norms more important than your policies and rules kind of set the tone in your environment from an ethics compliance standpoint. And there's an experiment that kind of highlights this that I like to refer to when I talk to people about clear expectations. And in this experiment, it involved visitors to a hospital. And so what the researchers did was they put a large flyer on the driver's side of the vehicles. And the flyer said, Driver Safety Week, please drive safely. And they put it in such a way that the driver or the visitor returning to their vehicle would have to remove the flyer to be able to drive the vehicle. And so they created two environments. The first was a clean environment. So the parking lot was pristine, but no trash can in sight. In the second environment, they took flyers, they threw them on the ground along with paper cups and cans and things like that. So what they found was, in the clean environment, only 14% of the visitors threw their flyer to the ground. In the dirty environment, 32% threw their flyers to the ground. Then they added, in the dirty environment, they added another component. They added a passerby who was reading a flyer and then threw it to the ground in clear view of the driver. They found that number jumped up from 32% to 54%. Amazing. So let's talk about strong ethical leadership now. This is probably one of the most critical components from a compliance leader's standpoint. And one of the things I like to talk about in terms of strong ethical leadership is the phenomenon, or call it that, what's called the spotlight of leadership. I'm using that term, borrowing that term from Jay Conger. And if you know Jay Conger, he's a professor of management and leadership at Claremont University. Very well-known speaker on the topic of leadership. And there's actually a TED Talk that Mr. Conger does. You can find that on the internet. But he talks about this phenomenon that he calls the spotlight of leadership. And I'm sure you've heard about it, probably used, maybe shadow the leader is another term that's often used. And what this phenomena reflects is that when you're in a position of leadership, there's this thing that happens. And what that thing is that there's a spotlight put on it. And it's a spotlight such that people, especially followers, but people are watching everything you say and everything you do. And what you say and do can have a profound effect as a leader. And there are lots of studies that show, again, that impact of, as a leader, in terms of setting a positive tone or in setting a negative tone. How can you, as a leader, really shape your organization by what you do and what you say? There has to be consistency. It's not that you can just say one thing and do another. There has to be consistency in your actions. So another aspect of strong ethical leadership is what I'll call understanding the effect of power. And I attended a conference last year sponsored by the Ethics and Compliance Initiative. They're an organization in Washington, D.C. And they had a speaker from the University of North Carolina. And she was a neuropsychologist, and she talked about the effect of power. And she talked about examples of when somebody has power, the change in behavior that you often see. And you think about people maybe that you've had contact with, and especially those that get promoted into to the higher ranks. Sometimes there's a change in their behavior. You see it all the time. And one great example of this, again, this effect, is the Stanford prisoner experiment that probably many of you are familiar with. For those of you that aren't, again, I would suggest you Google it. I think there's a documentary. It was done a couple years ago. But again, amazing story. Again, an example of you take just normal people and you put them in a position of power. Sometimes they'll take on a role, and again, in a negative way. So again, you really be conscious of the effect of power. So let me move now to ethical decision. Any questions, by the way, before I move on? All right. So ethical decision making. There, what we're talking about is trying again to do what we can, use those little tools to help employees make the right decision. And one of the experiments I like to talk about in this, under this category is what's called the mirror effect. And what the mirror effect is the power that can come from finding ways to actually see yourself and how you behave. And when I talk to leaders, I usually I'll give words of advice, and one of the words of advice that I give is try to find ways for introspection. One tip I often use is find a trusted colleague who you could confide in and trust, and ask them, how am I acting? How am I perceived? Because the ability to actually judge yourself and to see how you act is actually very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to see yourself. Yes?
Shouldn't your immediate supervisor be giving you feedback on that? Positive reinforcement?
Yeah, the question was, shouldn't your immediate supervisor be giving you feedback? I think the answer is yes. I mean, feedback is critically important. And when I talk about feedback, I like to make sure that it goes both ways. You get feedback from the employee, and feedback from the employee, and you give feedback to the employee. So in terms of the handicap, I'm going to call it that is the employee is going to be a little skeptical of what the supervisor has to say. I think there's certainly, the more trusted the relationship, I think the better. But I can tell you from experience, not every supervisor employee has that foundation of trust. You'd love to get there. It's critically important, but it's not always present. So I think that's a great suggestion, but I often suggest somebody who sees you in the workplace on a kind of frequent basis who you can trust. And one of the experiments that highlights the value of actually seeing yourself is an experiment that was done with kids around Halloween time. And in this experiment, what they did was they took houses, and the kids were going to come up to the house and walk inside where there was a bowl of candy. And there was a sign in front of the candy that said, please only take one piece. Okay, and what the experimenters did is they had the woman remind the kids to only take one piece, and then she left the room for a little bit to go and do some work. And then what they found was about a third of the kids took more than one piece. As soon as she was gone, a third of the kids took more than one piece. I can tell you from my own personal experience, when there was nobody present, there was a bowl of candy, I took a heck of a lot more than one piece. So I know the temptation. Then what they did is they added they changed the environment a little bit. The only change was they put a full-length mirror right behind the bowl of candy. That number went from 1/3 to 9%. So just the difference is just that impact of actually seeing yourself commit the crime, so to say, made a huge difference in the kids, the psychology and being willing to take the extra piece of candy. Yeah, amazing. And again, if you haven't figured out a theme here, one of the themes is whether we haven't evolved that far when we were kids to you see the same psychology at play, and the task is to try to take these lessons and really translate them to a workplace.
You've got another question?
Yes.
What if there was candy that they didn't like?
That's probably a significant factor. We can probably put that to use somehow in the workplace. Yes.
What you seem to establish is that we act in our own self-interest consistently, unless we are somehow kept in check. But your golfer case seems to suggest that you created, through culture, a new person of a different character by way of the rules, and that seemed to dominate his peer influences and really good.
Right. I think the lesson is not that all of us will follow the temptation. Again, you look at the statistics, there's certainly a percentage. So I'm not sure it's always the case that everyone's going to act in their self-interest.
Well,
but I think but it's a recognition that a percentage of people will. That if you don't have counter kind of forces, yeah, you're going to get a certain percentage that are going to do the wrong thing.
So if you look at Enron and you see the over-focused behavior on one thing, profitability, making profit, maximizing profit, you get and you take away the filters of constraint, you get a very skewed result. The question would be, why weren't there more whistleblowers throughout that?
Right, and the Enron example is a good one. Trying to figure out where I usually talk about that. It comes up with clear expectations, certainly ethical decision making. But one of the takeaways from Enron, Ford Pinto is another great example. For those of you, many of you are too young, probably to remember what a Ford Pinto is. So for those of you who don't remember the Ford Pinto, I'll give you the story. So in 1970, Ford set a goal of producing a vehicle that would sell for $2,000 and would weigh no more than 2,000 pounds. So for gas mileage purposes, so it would be great in gas mileage and it would be economical. And they were very successful. Ford Pinto was a big hit. The problem was that there was a problem with the vehicle that tended to explode rear-end collisions. 53 people lost their lives. And one of the reasons why it exploded was that there was substandard material, lighter material used for both the bumper and for the fuel bladder, and it contributed to the explosions that occurred. Now, the lesson that kind of compliance professionals take away from Ford is that when you set, people are amazing. When you set aggressive goals, they'll usually find a way to achieve it. And we're amazing in our ability to figure out answers to problems. And that's what happened with Ford employees. The problem, so you can celebrate that. The problem was the message wasn't tempered with the message of doing it the right way. It was speaking up. All those things that are going to kind of counter that natural drive that employees have to succeed. So, one of the things that I counsel our leadership on is let's set goals. Let's make sure they're clear. It's okay to have stretch goals. We cannot lose sight of how those goals are met. So it's always let's shoot for the stars and let's do it the right way. And hopefully that's the message that our leaders are sending to employees. So comfort speaking up. This is, again, and the gentleman over here mentioned, it's critically important that you create an environment where employees, students, faculty feel that they can speak up and report when there's violations, because again, as a compliance officer, you want to deal with the problem at an early stage. You don't want the regulator knocking on your door and telling you you this is what we found out, and plus you're going to be penalized, multi-million, you're going to see a multi-million-dollar penalty. So you want to address the problems, and so your employees really have the best perspective to be able to report on what they're seeing, and giving you the chance to deal with it. So some of the things that we put in place, and most institutions put in place to encourage this, is to have helplines. So we have a very robust helpline system that's operated by a third party. It allows for anonymity. Confidentiality and anonymity is critically important. It's one of the things under the federal sentencing guidelines the federal government looks for in evaluating the quality of a compliance program. Another thing, just in terms of comfort, speaking of, the benefit of that is just, I think, more engagement you have, the more that employees feel comfortable, just the better usually you see in terms of performance. So you see better numbers in terms of compliance, and also you see higher levels of performance. And their studies show that just through engagement, you can really move the needle. There's one study that involved voters on the eve of an election. And what the study found was just by asking voters whether they plan to vote, just engaging them on the topic, increased the chances that they would vote by 25%. The same thing was true for people who were thinking about buying a new car. And the researchers found just by engaging with the prospective buyer and asking them whether they plan to buy a car within the next 6 months, increased the chances by 32% that they would buy a new car. And so again, the point of this is again just the difference that engagement makes. So when you're talking, it can make a big difference. And lastly, organizational justice. The point there is, again, as a component of a strong ethics and compliance program, you want to build the sense that if you do report something, kind of going back to comfort speaking out, that action will be taken and that action will be fair. So one of the things we do at Edison, for example, is we actually will report statistics on the amount of wrongdoing that we're seeing without any personal identifiers. We'll report on the types of conduct that we're seeing and the types of corrective action that go along with the misconduct. So again, the employees, and it's probably true here at Redlands, they have to believe that if I'm going to go out and live and report something, that it's going to be addressed, in a fair way. Any questions before we leave this? How are we doing time?
We're fine, great.
Okay. So we'll move to compliance now, and some of what I talked about before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but this is, I talked about the ethics framework, all emanating from the federal sentencing guidelines, and this is the compliance framework. Again, if you talk to any compliance professional, this is the basic prevent, monitor, detect, respond, and end. But this is essentially how you build a compliance framework. You can see the different elements under each category. So in terms of prevention, and it's true at Edison, it's probably true here. We catalog all the requirements, so there's usually an intake process, so you understand what the rules are. Then you have the monitoring process. You'll audit you'll have controls. You'll audit your controls to make sure they're operating. You'll have a methodology to try to detect violations, and then you have your response when there's a violation that's been detected. Okay. Oops. So, as I mentioned, it's always my goal to make sure that I leave the audience with something to take away from the conversation. And this is my fallback. So if nothing else, you at least walk away with a good recipe. This actually came up the other day. I was at my in-laws' house. There's more information if you want to know. And my young niece was eating hummus with some celery and carrots, and commented, "Man, this is the most amazing thing. How do you make this stuff?" And I went on to explain how easy it is to make hummus. So for those of you that haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. It's a great go-to staple in terms of snack food. So with that, I think that's the end of my comments. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Yeah, go ahead with the questions, and then if Mike, you need to paraphrase them, or I can paraphrase them for the benefit of the
Okay.
video. Okay, thanks, Mike.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So at least a number of the folks in here are seniors about to graduate in 7 weeks. And I wonder if you could share with us what you think is going to be where are they going to see the first challenge for themselves in that first job about ethics?
In that first job, well, let me take a step back. My guess is you're experiencing challenges probably on a week-to-week basis just in life. Again, my philosophy is really those same pressures that we have in life to do the right thing. I mean, just think about the rules that we operate on a daily basis. I mean, I was driving from Rosemead out here, and had to make sure that I followed the speed limit. And as the flow of traffic is whizzing by, and setting the norms for me, and I'm deciding how fast should I drive, what's the risk involved, am I going to get pulled over or not? Then there's just, the other rules that we live by. If we're in relationships, there are certain rules that govern our relationships, certain things we're supposed to do and not do, and all those things. So, I think those same day-to-day challenges are actually then translate to the workplace. So again, I'm not sure that you're necessarily going to experience these unique challenges. The challenges are going to be certainly unique to the job and to the environment that you're in, but it could come from anywhere. It could come from anywhere. I'm not sure. I can predict, because it's one thing if you go back to the people slide and think about the individual cultures that were at play. It's a different. Martha Stewart's motivation for insider trading was probably completely different than Lance Armstrong's challenge in the cycling community, where probably, at least I think in his mind, just about every successful rider was taking some type of performance-enhancing drug. Again, in Martha Stewart's situation, maybe the rationalization is that it's no big deal. Everybody's, this is small. Because I'm a multi-millionaire, what do I care about, another million here or there? So, there's an interesting, just to expand on this a little bit, I'll share with you, that there's a field of study in ethics that looks at, it's called ethical drift. I don't know if you've heard that. Anybody heard that term? Ethical drift. And the notion behind ethical drift is that we have a set of values and principles that we all live by. And those drive our decision making. But in certain situations, those values will become blurred. The ethics will become blurred. And what was kind of clear, the clear morality start to become a little more bleached out, and our brains tend to rationalize. And let me just give you some examples of what's called moral disengagement. And it's that kind of justification that we'll use all the time, almost on a weekly basis. Probably all of us have engaged in this. So one type of moral disengagement is called moral justification. And tell me if these sound familiar. I'm doing it for a good cause, right? So there's some great examples that you can probably think about, some scandals that have occurred, and you justify it by saying, I'm doing it for the greater good, right? Another one is advantageous comparison standard. What others do is worse than what we are doing. The classic one is, it's the industry standard. The industry is doing it, so what I'm doing can't be that wrong. Another one is, it's called displacement of responsibility. Tell me again if this doesn't sound familiar. My boss made me do it. Right? Really easy. As long as there's some other greater authority that you can you can disengage from the morality of your decision making. Another one, diffusion of responsibility. This is a good one. I hear this at times. it was a group decision. I had to be a team player. Distortion of consequences. It's not a big deal. Dehumanization. He doesn't deserve any better. Attribution of blame. It's their own fault. They should have, so on and so forth. Yeah, I think those are, I know, there's probably a complex answer to a simple
Well, thank you, I
question.
appreciate it.
Other questions? Yes?
What has been one of your ethical dilemmas that you've had throughout your career?
Wow. Confidentiality reasons, I can't talk about any actual. Well, there was one recently. I won't go into details, but it was again the question of making a decision or making a business recommendation, and the question being really. Do we self-report or do we not self-report? And you start to get into a lot of these justifications. Is it a violation? Well, it's not a clear violation. Will it do more harm than good if we get into it? What's the industry standard? You can almost go down the list. I probably went through each of those from a thought process. And you start to bring others into the conversation, and you get a group think going, and you think that if everyone's on the same page, then somehow it releases you from that moral decision, and you have to take a step back and say, what's my role here? And that's a really kind of interesting kind of point from an ethics officer standpoint, where your role is both as a business executive in the company, as a business decision maker, and yet you have a unique role as an ethics officer, which you should be able to detach yourself from the business and be kind of an independent voice for the company. That's why, for example, I have a reporting line to the board of directors, is to kind of create an environment where I feel that I have the capability, notwithstanding what the president or CEO may want to do what's best for the company. So, and that's again, by design, you create that type of reporting chain so that you have that environment that at least you hope that I feel comfortable taking a step in, and if need be, going straight to the board of directors. Yes, ma'am.
So what is your opinion about CEOs that are in the same position as like the chairman of the board?
CEOs, I'm sorry?
Yeah, like a CEO is in the same position, they're CEO and chairman of the board. What is your opinion on
Oh, we have that at Edison. I don't think that creates. I don't see a problem with that. You still have the construct of the board to be able to act in an unbiased way. Yeah, so I don't see that as a big problem. It's not an issue that I've had to grapple with. I think the question that comes up more often in the context of ethics and compliance is having the CECO either as a standalone and reporting to the CEO and the board of directors, or which is still traditional. It's changing. It's still traditional having the CECO report to the general counsel. In a lot of companies, the CECO is within the general counsel's office. And our philosophy is that the general counsel's office, the law department, has a different role to play. So they have an advocacy slant, almost by nature. There's a huge, obviously there's a huge compliance component in what they do, but there's this advocacy slant that could be problematic for a compliance officer.
I think there's a question back there.
Yes, ma'am.
In a company that doesn't have an ethics officer, maybe a smaller company, who does that usually fall to?
A lot of times it'd be the law department or the general counsel's office. Small companies, you have the compliance, I would say the policies part of it within, say, HR. So you might have HR dealing with compliance. And really, usually nobody thinking more broadly about ethics. So it would really be the president. For example, we have several small subsidiaries. We've recently acquired some companies, and So that's one of the challenges that I know. Again, we have the benefit of having a SECO at the holding company, so I can provide some counsel and oversight. But ultimately, I believe that ethics and compliance should be localized. You know, it really has to be driven at the local level. So, you know, it's a question that I'll be asking myself, looking at those company structure and figuring out, you know, roles and responsibilities within that small structure. But ultimately, somebody has to be accountable for ethics and compliance at the end of the day. You know, the idea behind the federal sentencing guidelines, if you look into it, it was designed in a way to be able to be applicable to, you know, a company of 50 or 100 people or a company of thousands. And that's the way I approach it. Those, you know, those frameworks that I talked about should be transferable, notwithstanding the size of the company. You still have to have rules, and you still have to have controls, and you still have to have you know, somebody who's accountable, and so on and so forth. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
On the compliance side, you have so many regulations you have to deal with. How do you handle having the expertise, the subject matter experts feeding information up into the compliance officer?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have several compliance program areas. For example, HR has its own compliance program. Environmental has its own compliance program area. Privacy is another compliance program. Energy regulation, which is massive in terms of the amount of regulation, is its own compliance program. Within each of those areas, we have a compliance program lead. Then in addition, all of the policies or practices that touch on those areas will be essentially developed by the subject matter experts. So for any policy that we have, we'll have the law department involved, we'll have compliance involved, we'll have subject matter experts involved in drafting those policies. In terms of the harder question is how do you actually implement those in the various business units, and how do you get people to do the right thing and follow the rules. You know, again, that's where controls come into play. But it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. And there's a big movement right now, and we're doing a lot of it because we're. You know, I don't know if I had it up there. We're talking about thousands of rules and regulations. You can't apply the same rigor to all of those rules and regulations in terms of policies, controls, so you know, detection approaches, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of companies are taking a risk-based approach. So there's a lot of sophisticated analytics that are going into risk assessments. And so really to help focus resources on the riskier areas. And it's almost out of necessity we have to do this. Yes, ma'am.
You talked a bit about being in the law department and then transitioning later in your career into ethics and compliance. You talked a bit about how in law there's more of an advocacy slant and how important culture is. So I'm wondering how you personally navigated that and maybe retrained some of the folks around you to wear more of a compliance hat rather than a legal.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate we had a lot of compliance. When I came into the group, there were a number of compliance professionals that didn't come from law. Now, several of my directors actually did come from the law department. For example, the head of our investigations and helpline group is a former lawyer in the law department and also a former federal prosecutor. So in his job, in terms of investigation, having those skills as a lawyer have actually come in very, very handy. So that, you know, I didn't have to navigate that part of it. But, you know, in terms of my own personal development, in terms of kind of shaping my perspective, kind of getting away from thinking of myself as an advocate for the company and now more as a kind of compliance policing arm of the company. I think it's, you know, talked to my predecessor, talked to a lot of compliance professionals, went to training, you know, the same training that Stan did this past year, and I'm still learning. You know, I'm still learning about you know, what it is to be a compliance professional, what levers to pull, how that perspective is different. And it's the types of challenges that I was talking about. That's where you learn a lot. That's where it's a check on yourself. And you have to come to grips on what's your role and what's, in terms of my actions, what's doing the right thing, and what's not doing the right thing. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that Southern California Edison reports the types of compliance and ethical problems that you see and the actions that resulted. Why did you report these? Do you report these to the employees, and what changes, if anything, have you noticed as a result of this action?
Hard to see the impacts. Usually I get a sense when I go out and talk to employees. One, I first have to make sure that people are even aware. So getting the information out to thousands of employees, letting them know that we have that resources on the internal portal is tough. It's tough. We do it through stories in our company newspaper, portal postings, and so on and so forth. But not everybody reads those things, and so that's kind of the first step, is trying to get the word out that exists, because it's not always the easiest to find. Secondly, in terms, again, kind of judging part of it is having a good story to tell when I get questions and when I talk to employees. And if I get the question, for example, and I've received this question many times, I've reported something and nothing gets done. And it's important to actually have a story to tell. That here's what we're doing. Here's a resource you can go to. Because you're actually, you're in some respects, you're actually continuing to build your brand as a compliance group. You're really trying to build credibility with the employees. And so at least having a good story to tell and be able to point to something tangible that an employee can look to actually see that discipline is handed out. They can see the statistics and so on and so forth. So, that's part of it. Is it making a difference? The way I look at it, as I was talking about, there are all these different levers that I'm trying to pull to try to make a difference and build a culture. Ultimately, we'll be judged probably by there's lots and lots of different metrics. To be honest with you, it's still an area where I haven't found a perfect metric that really tells you how you're doing. The helpline statistics is one metric. Employee surveys is another metric, but that can be really shaped by what the company is going through at a certain point in time. Just my talking to employees is kind of another touch point where I can get a sense of whether we're making progress in terms of trying to build that culture. But it's hard. It's really hard. Did I answer your question?
Well, I thought
you
that
can say
what
no,
you said,
it's okay.
I thought that what you said was that you report out these statistics. So my question was about, maybe you didn't say that, but I thought
what we do is here, let me give you an example of what we'll do. We'll pick for example, there's a couple things we'll do. We'll pick a period going back at least 4 quarters. So we're trying to age the data a little bit so that it's not fresh in somebody's mind. They see a set of facts that they can figure out, oh yeah, that was so-and-so. That's the last thing we want to do. Because if that will undercut confidentiality and anonymity, and that'll undercut the program. So we'll go back, we'll provide age data, we'll explain the fact pattern, taking out any personal identifiers, and then we'll say what the violation was, and we'll say what the corrective action was related to that action. And we'll do it for every substantiated allegation from that period. And we'll post it. And we'll do that every quarter. So that's the type of statistics. In addition, what we do, we'll show other helpline statistics will show, for example, let's say 28% of the reported, the investigated allegations were substantiated. X percentage involved timekeeping and expense reports. X percentage was discrimination. X percentage was harassment. X percent. So those are some of the statistics.
Have you noticed any change in reporting since you've instituted this process?
Our helpline reporting numbers are pretty good. So we saw a huge increase after an extensive outreach program on the helpline. So we did a whole program essentially advertising the existence of the helpline, along with the importance of reporting matters. Actually, it's looking down, I have a little helpline card on my back of my ID card. We put those out. We saw a huge jump in the number of helpline reports. The other thing we've been doing recently is really pushing use of the helpline for advice calls. And we've seen a huge number. So we're kind of putting it out as a resource, not only to report wrongdoing, but more importantly for employees to seek advice on policies and their own challenges that they have. And we've seen some huge numbers, and I think that's making a difference too.
Mike, maybe one last question, gentlemen.
You want to get rid of me, Stan?
No, not at all.
I'm sorry. Well, there's two, but I'll take two questions.
I had a two-part question. How much olive oil is in the recipe?
It's a good point. Not too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
And
one
then
tablespoon.
and they have tahini. The tahini's a little hard to find.
The real question is, how do you orientate new employees to the ethics program when they come on board, and what is your ongoing training with existing employees?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I didn't talk about really training, but big part of building that culture is through training. So we include an ethics compliance component as part of our orientation training. We also include it as part of our ongoing manager training. So we're going to have we're moving towards a manager academy, and ethics compliance will be a component as part of that training program. The code of conduct, for example, we have annual code of conduct training. We went to a kind of a 2-year cycle for the extensive 45-minute training, and in the off years we have about a 15 to 20-minute abbreviated program, just to kind of avoid employees getting tired of all the training components that they bombarded with. So that's plus there's constant online things that we have. We have vignettes dealing with particular issues, and then there's specific training like privacy is another place we have specific subject matter training on. Most companies right now there's really a huge emphasis on the whole privacy area. And we didn't really talk, deviate a little bit. I didn't really even talk about data analytics, which is a huge area right now, especially in the area of privacy. But yeah, it's a great question, and it's important from an institution standpoint not to lose sight of the importance of training. It's one of the components that one of the factors under the federal sentencing guidelines that the federal government will look at to judge your compliance program.
With the social media on the rise, especially for our generation, how has compliance policies been changing? Have you noticed any ethical dilemmas within your company regarding social?
Not ethical issues. I wouldn't call it ethics issues, compliance issues. Okay, so what I mean by that is we have a social media policy. It's kind of constantly being looked at. We just revised it. The technology is changing constantly how people communicate. So it's one of the areas we'll continue to watch, and that's an area where some questions come up in terms of compliance. For example, what if an employee uses social media, but their personal account to talk about the company? What is that? Is that a violation of policy? Is it not a violation of policy? What can someone say? Can employees go in, for example, and talk about the workplace? And we've had that happen in the past where employees will talk about things happening in the workplace, and then a coworker sees it and reports it as being a violation of policy. So what can people say? What can they not say? There's also NLRB, National Labor Relations. The NLRB restrictions on employees' ability to talk about workplace issues. So you can put reasonable restrictions, but you cannot prevent an employee from talking about the workplace. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you again, Montoya. On behalf of the University of Redlands School of Business, the Banta Center for Business Ethics and Society, would like to give you this gift as a token of our appreciation for sharing your time and talent with us this evening, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. assembled a small goodie basket. It's our version of the Oscar swag bag, but I don't think the value is quite the same as theirs for IRS purposes. And so, again, thank you so very much. In the basket is the University of Redlands frame, and since this is California, a gift card to Whole Foods. Mike, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Before you leave, first of all, I'd like to thank Karen Crocker for all of her valuable assistance in this event. Karen, where are you? And I'd also like to give a quick shout out to the staff here, Carol, Maricela, and James, to name a few. Thanks to them. As you leave, if you would like to add your name to the Banta Center mailing list for information on future events, please see Karen. Again, thank you for your attendance this evening. Next, it's time to see if Ben picks Jojo, or she's from Texas, or Lauren from Marina Del Rey. So let's see who Ben picks. The Bachelor, season finale. Oh, great. Drive safely. Have a good night. Thank you.
It really wasn't.